You're listening to Soap Dirt, the latest in television entertainment news.
Hey there, General Hospital fans. It's Belinda from Soap Dirt, and we have to talk about the looming question of whether Luke Spencer will be back on the ABC soap opera. A huge swath of fans do not think he's dead for several reasons that we'll dive into. And I've got an update about Tony Geary and what he said not long ago about the possibility of a return to the show from his past. So let's take a look at all this info and why everyone's asking about a Luke comeback. But if you haven't, please click subscribe. Okay, now let's dig into it. So we had Tracy Quartermaine on Friday looking at a photo on her phone and bawling while on the plane. That was on the preview at the end of Thursday's episode. And then on the Friday episode, we saw it happen. I will admit, and you guys addressed it in the comments, thank you, that I jumped the gun. I got a little excited because I thought she'd gotten the news of Bobbie Spencer's death while traveling back to Port Charles. I was overeager because I do have a firm spoiler about Bobbie's death storyline, and I've shared it with you. James Patrick Stewart, who plays Valentine, and Finola Hughes, who plays Anna, said at a fan event in New York and New Jersey a few weeks back that the Bobbie death storyline was kicking off after Thanksgiving, and it is after Turkey Day. Even the leftovers are gone. So this plot will be soon, not as soon as I was hoping for on Friday. So thank you for bearing with me on that. I did get a little excited. Honestly, and you guys know this if you're regular here at the channel, because I've talked about it a lot, they need to give us the closure on Jackie Zeman and Bobbie Spencer, and it is absolutely coming, just didn't start on Friday. So anyway, on the plane, Tracy said out loud that she missed Luke, and frankly, that has some fans torn. You know, the subject of Luke Spencer is deeply polarizing in the GH fandom. I mean, let's face it, a lot of the times, he was not a nice guy. He was not a hero. He was what you would call an anti-hero, where someone dark that you find heroic, but who is not, you know, in his core, always a nice guy. He raped Laura when she was a teenager, and then the ABC soap twisted it into an epic love story. And I will say their wedding was the first thing I recall watching when I was really little. My big sister, who's more than a decade older than me, was a GH fanatic, and I remember watching it. She even left school early so she wouldn't miss it. I barely remember Liz Taylor as Helena Cassadine. I do remember Jeannie's amazing veil and her, big dress. She looked like a princess, and her big smile, as they said, I do. Of course, as a youngster, I knew nothing about the rape at the disco. I found out about that later and went back and, watched the older videos once YouTube came around. So understandably, there's a group of fans who frankly don't want him back, and they think Tracy's better off without him. I kind of see it a little differently. Not that I think Luke is just a paragon of virtue or anything, but in terms of Luke and Tracy, their romance came later in both their lives once he and Laura were irretrievably broken. And let's face it, Tracy Quartermaine is no shrinking violet. She's not a good girl. She's been pretty awful too. She held back her dad Edward's heart medication while he had a coronary, or it was an episode, until he signed ELQ documents for her. She's ruthless. And I will say, of course, I absolutely hate what Luke did back in the 70s to Laura and, some other of his despicable deeds, but he is still a legacy character that many people adore and want back. And now, with Bobbie's death plot coming, many fans wonder if Tony Geary will be back for her funeral/memorial. And yes, General Hospital says he's dead because of Victor in a cable car accident. I believe it was in Austria, which if you've been to the mountains in Austria, I actually have years ago with the military. And those are some big mountains. Not that I think you would survive a cable car fall anywhere, just by the way. But I will also say Victor Cassadine faked other deaths and kept the people alive, like Drew Kane and just Holly Sutton, I think were two of the most recent. Even so, I would not count on seeing Tony Geary back as Luke Spencer. Not now, honestly, not ever, for many reasons. His more than 1,350 GH episodes definitely represent the bulk of his acting career. He's done some other things, but when you when you think Tony Geary, it's synonymous with General Hospital. He officially retired in 2015, and initially, in a couple of interviews, he said he'd consider returning for a really good plot briefly, like for a few weeks run, but not if the same writer was in charge. He didn't say it quite like that. He said it would depend on who's the writer, something like that. So at the time, Ron Carlivati was the head writer. Frank Valentini was still the showrunner. And Ron and Tony apparently despised one another. Carlivati now is showrunner over at Days of Our Lives. I actually really like his work a lot. And it was funny because in his exit interview, Geary kind of dissed him, but he didn't say his name. He just called him the writer. That's how he referred to him. And Ron Carlivati slammed him back during his final WGA Writers Award win for General Hospital before he transitioned over to Days. So yeah, bad blood. So now the thing is, Tony Geary lives in Amsterdam with his husband, Claudio Gama, who he married in 2020, and they have their beloved cat Max, and he has a whole life in Amsterdam. He doesn't live in America. He doesn't really work in LA. He comes back to the US now and then for stuff, because you'll occasionally see photos of him with some General Hospital cast members, like out to lunch or dinner or whatever. So he did come back 2 years later on May 4th, 2017 to a single General Hospital episode. That was when Jane Elliot was retiring as Tracy. Also said she wouldn't be back. Of course, she has been. I don't think she's going to stick around long term, just for what it's worth. And Tony was literally on screen for maybe 5 seconds, and he did not say one word, not a one. She left Port Charles, said goodbye to everybody, flew to Amsterdam where they were going to be living, and met him at a cafe, and they just looked at each other. And that was it. It was just like, why? You know, I mean, it's just very clear Tony Geary is done with this soap. I frankly don't even know how they would lure him back, no matter the circumstances. But a lot of people think that he might come back to say goodbye to his soap sister, Jacklyn Zeman. But there was something that happened since her death that has me doubting even that would bring him back. So there was this parody video that Tony Geary starred in, a little comedy thing, and he was playing an ex-soap actor named Trent. He was using a fake name, and they were using a fake soap name. Instead of General Hospital, they were calling it Truth and Consequences, but it was very clear on this parody, I can't show it to you because it's somebody else's copyright, that it was about General Hospital. So two of Geary's friends, one of them was Ian Buchanan, who played Duke Lavery, were pretending they were like the executive producer, maybe one was the writer or something, and they were asking him to return. They were offering him script control. They offered him double his salary, and he said his salary was an insult, and they said double it, and he said still an insult. And it was very funny. And then in Ian Buchanan's scenes, he was trying to tempt him to come back and said, the fans want you back. We want you back. And he said, come home. And Tony was sitting smoking a cigarette in his house in Amsterdam and said, I am home and I'm not leaving home. And again, this was a parody, but to me, it was clearly a message to anyone hoping to see him back at GH. So if you want to see it, look for Jim Warren's channel. If you search on YouTube for Jim Warren, Tony Geary. As to the timing of this, okay, and so this is not an older video. This is a much newer video. The Bobbie Spencer actress, Jacklyn Zeman, died May 9th, 2023, after a brief battle with cancer. 3 weeks later was when this parody video surfaced with him, discussing what was a potential return to General Hospital without saying the word. So I don't know if they shot this video before or after her death. I kind of feel like it was in response to the immediate clamor to have him back. And I think it was meant to address ongoing questions from fans about whether he'd be back, and he made it clear no. So I do think if Tony Geary did come back as Luke for her funeral, he might only be willing to do the same kind of thing where he's there, but he doesn't say anything. But honestly, that would just be weird to have Bobbie's brother Luke at the funeral without doing dialogue, and he really doesn't seem to want to return. But we'll find out soon. I want to just cushion the blow. Don't get your hopes up. That way, if for some reason he does turn up, you'll be surprised, but I just don't see it happening. So what do you think? Let me know. Please click subscribe if you haven't already. Tell me if you'd like to have Luke back, or if you're okay with him just remaining dead and missing his sister's funeral service. And as always, we're here talking GH 7 days a week. This has been Belinda from Soap Dirt. Thanks for stopping by to chat.
Thank you for being a loyal listener. Follow us wherever you get your podcast, because you don't want to miss the next episode. Soap Dirt is on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.